Waiting for Seconds is a podcast that talks about subjects of self-harm, suicide, eating disorders, and other personal subjects. If you don't feel comfortable listening to this podcast alone, listen to it with someone important to you. May that be a teacher, a parent figure, or someone you feel comfortable being with. Please enjoy the rest of the episode. All by myself. Gotta be all by myself.
A clean take on that.
Yeah, I was doing a clean take for a stupid.
Cold open.
What did I call it the first time?
I don't know.
This is Waiting for Seconds, the interview podcast where we meet people and ask them who they are and why they are. I'm Shannon Miller, and I'm joined by my co-host, Malcolm Outkelt. He's 21 now. I'm so proud of him.
Yesterday.
As of yesterday, when we record this. And we will be talking with Michelle Simpson. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, as Shannon pointed out, I'm Michelle. So I grew up in a very small town. Pretty much everybody knew everybody, or someone was related to somebody, kind of situation. And although I was in my college years, moved to like a bigger city and got to have like experiences there. And now I work at a school as a speech language pathologist assistant, which is very wordy. And also as a barista at Starbucks.
Well, hell yeah.
That's great and all. Can you tell me about your cats?
My cats.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They're super cute. So, I have Jordy. She's a tuxedo cat. She is very small. She's probably like from her tail, like being the tip of my finger, and then like her face goes to like my elbow. So like very teeny.
Wow, that is not a big cat. Huh?
That is a small
It's
cat.
not. She's so
baby.
small, but she's so feisty. And I actually take her on walks on a leash.
Oh.
Aww.
Yeah. I started doing that when she was a kitten because I knew that I would be moving to like a city area outside of like my parents' house, and so I know she would want to still be outside, but obviously like it's a little dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And my other cat, his name's Kip, and he's the exact opposite. So he's a black cat, and he's 20 pounds. 20 pounds of love.
So
that's a big man.
Significantly bigger than the other one.
He's so big. And he loves sitting on laps and getting lots of pets. He is not afraid of people at all, even if he's unfamiliar with them. Like, he'll just be like, oh, hi, you're human? Pet me. Cool.
You know what humans do.
Right. And then Jordy is terrified of people she doesn't know, and she's like, that's it. I'm going under the bed. I ain't about this. It's so funny. But they get along like super well, so that made me feel like a lot better. And it's nice knowing that having like two jobs and being like gone, that they still have like each other, and that when I get home, like I can snuggle and cuddle them.
Good cat.
Good cat.
So I met Michelle through my oldest brother, Austin. We started playing his campaign together, and I think that's how I met Michelle. I want to say. Well, I'm trying to get the memories right. My brain has been sick for maybe a week now.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I've been congested and coughing, but I feel better.
Oh, that's good.
Anyways, I'm pretty sure it was in my first campaign with you, Malcolm, and Austin, and that's how we met, and we did a 3-year long campaign. It was very fun.
It was
It was
very
so,
fun.
it was so fun. But yeah, that's pretty much how I met you guys. And it's crazy to think that it was that long ago and that it lasted that long, which is awesome.
That's crazy.
I'm kind of surprised that you guys didn't know each other because it felt like there was some kind of like it felt like you guys knew each other where I felt like I had no clue who the hell Michelle was when we first met. That might have just been me. I mean, that might be me misremembering the situation. That might also just be that, like, you're better at social interactions than I was.
Are you talking about
Right?
me?
Well, like,
Yeah, you.
I don't know about that, but no, because no, we didn't meet during that one winter that I was out there in
yeah, that's
Missoula.
true. That was the first time we
Anyways,
met in person, anyway.
so what was your job again? What is it that you do?
So I'm a speech language pathologist assistant. So, I pretty much get to do all the fun stuff, which is awesome. So, pretty much what my job is. So I work in a school specifically. So you can work in a hospital or with a speech therapist in their private practice. But in the school, pretty much what I do is if a child has difficulty saying like their sounds, so if they say R incorrectly, I also help them with any language difficulties. So if they have a hard time understanding what conjunctions are in a sentence or what inferencing is, I go over that. And then I also help with what we scientifically call pragmatics, but it's basically like just social interaction. And so some kids may have difficulty with that. So I help them with that. And I basically get to interact with the kids and not have to do any paperwork, which is awesome.
You get the fun parts, and somebody else gets to do the paperwork.
Yeah, exactly.
What made you want to go into that job? Because or that field? Because I know you've been studying that in college for a while.
Right. So, my mom's a speech therapist, and so I kind of was aware of it, but I honestly didn't decide what I wanted to do career-wise till I was a senior in high school. And I was like, "Oh, darn. Wow, that came up. Now I have to decide like kind of what I want to do." And I was like, "I have no idea." And my mom's like, "Okay, well, uh what are things that you enjoy doing like all the time, even if it's hard in terms of like subjects?" And so I thought, well, I love language and linguistics. Throughout middle school and high school, I studied Spanish and French, and then in college, I did sign language. So I love learning languages and anything to have to do with that. And then I have some interest in science. Like I'm not very good at mathematics, but the empirical system and trying to like from observation to testing things out, like I really like that process. So I was like, okay. And I knew for sure that I wanted to do something that inquired like socializing with people. Because I'm a very social person, and I think like any job that didn't have that aspect would be really tough for me. And my mom's like, well, you might really love my job because it basically does all that stuff. And when I looked into it, what I liked about it is how versatile it is. So it's like, oh, you could do a private practice. So private practices is usually you specialize in a specific thing. So there's a speech therapist that specializes in stuttering. And so they might have like a clinic that they own and devote their time to that. You could work in the hospitals and do that kind of setting, or you could be in the school. And I thought school for sure, because vacation time, and I love traveling, and I knew I wanted to have time for that. So
Having
it's like,
summers
yeah,
off is a big boon.
yeah, it's so nice.
Well, I don't know if I've ever actually mentioned this to you, but I had a really back in early grade school, I was nearly incomprehensible in my speaking, and I had a speech therapist who helped me significantly.
Awesome.
So I really appreciate what you're doing, because I like that I know how to put words out there and have people understand them, and that would not be true if not for people like you and your mom.
Right. And I think, like, even actually working in it, like from being in the school to actually interacting with kids and stuff, is like just how big of an impact just saying like a sound incorrectly is
Hmm.
socially. I mean, I've had some kids like cry because they're getting so frustrated because they can't do it and they're being made fun of or having pressure at home and stuff. And like, I always have to remind them, be like, okay, wait, this is something that's hard for you. And everybody gets to like that point, and it's like, you are making progress. Like, this is what you're doing. You went from this point and now you're here. And it seems like a tiny step, but like, those matter, and they'll snowball eventually and you'll get there. And so they're like, okay, we're cool.
It's just kind of a long process, but very emotional.
Very emotional. And well, like, there's another aspect that it's not a problem, it's actually more of a fun thing, but it was like, oh yeah, I didn't even think about that. But like, so I'm 24, so like pretty young, you know.
Mm.
And so like, it's interesting to see how like kids interact with me versus my supervisors, who are like their 40s to their 60s. Especially high school, because I remember talking to one of my high schoolers and going over some of the stuff that they're working on. And then they start talking about this video game, and I'm like, oh yeah, like, have you gotten to like this level or like this point? And they're like, you play video game? I'm like, yeah, I do. And they're like, what games do you play? I'm like, oh, Skyrim, Near Automata. And they're like, Skyrim? That's an old person game. And I'm like, hey, they had new DLCs. They had their anniversary edition. Technically, it's new.
I bought Skyrim just recently, so it's new. They
Right?
re-released it. I swear.
They've re-released it so many times. Ah.
That
Well-
way that the difference between how the children look at you, and I guess I say children when I mean high schoolers, look at
They are
you, who's kind of relatable, and
right.
the old 60-year-old who's never heard of a video game.
Exactly. And so, like, approach to therapy has been super fun, because sometimes my supervisors are like, okay, you have like this connection with them. Let's like work together to figure out like how to plan the session out to possibly incorporate these things that they're interested in, to make it more fun, because it's one of those things where it's like, when you do something that's super difficult or hard or frustrating, especially when they're in high school, um, with like sound disorders, it's like they've had this probably from either elementary school on or middle school on. So it's like they're kind of at this point where they've almost given up, because they're like, I've been this way for like ever and it's still not like there. And so it's like, you know what, let's make this as fun as possible while still like addressing these things, and like help building them up and building up their interests and things. And it just makes it so much easier, because they actually do better because they're excited to actually come, which is super nice.
Yeah.
Trick
Well-
them into learning with things that they like.
I do that all the time. I'm just like, they don't think. They think they're playing a game. They think they're playing Uno. But
You've
no,
ruined
they're not.
them.
You're manipulating them, Michelle.
You know,
A
I'm a
monster.
master
Wake up,
of social
sheeple.
skills, you know.
Well, it's nice that you're helping people like get past what they struggle through, and it's hard and emotional. But I'd like to ask, is there something that like either growing up or something like today that you struggle with more than others?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's kind of hard to like mm, make it like one thing because I feel like I've had probably like a few things that I've had difficulty and they've kind of put me on this interesting path. But like so I have a ADHD. So
Mm.
there's but like I didn't know until college, which that's super interesting because myself and my family, we just kind of assumed that a lot of these things were just like my personality, which I mean it is, but it's like, oh, it's that, but also kind of this way of thinking that's a little bit different that makes certain things harder. So I was kind of like the space cadet at school,
Mm.
like very much in my head, and a lot of times I think my teachers assumed that I just wasn't paying attention or not caring, but I was just zoned out and I didn't even know. um just kind of like in my head, and sometimes like some of the things I think about, they are related to the class, but the sometimes that thought bubble just becomes a thought web, and sometimes it's hard to stop it. So like I remember in university, I was taking a statistics class, and the professor's like, okay, we're talking about retrospective data. So I was like, okay, retrospective, retro, that means like old, like something in the past. Inspective is to like see. And then I was like, okay, got it. So it's just like data there. And so most people would stop that thought and then go back to whatever the professor's saying. But then it went to Retroville from Jimmy Neutron. That's why everything looks like it's in the 50s, but also like today.
Oh, yeah.
And then it just keeps going. And then I get back into it, and I probably missed like 15 minutes of class right there.
Just kind of
Figured out in
spiraling.
Retroville. You did
I was like, gosh darn it, Jimmy Neutron.
it.
Brain blast.
It's like you're supposed to help me with my education, not the opposite. I'm supposed to be smarter. And like sometimes it is good to have those things, because sometimes I can make connections in my head that some people wouldn't. And so I think that's why I was super good at language and linguistics, because it's like, oh yeah, like this word is kind of like this word in English. Maybe they're similar, or this word is similar to Spanish. And so it was a lot easier to memorize certain things. But you also like miss class time, which is really tough. The other thing that was hard, and I'm still kind of working at, is I guess like socializing to a certain degree. So like a lot of the habits are just how I was as a kid. I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then having like adult relationships where my friends are more able to articulate that maybe that my style of communication is a little odd and are able to say it to me instead of like when I was younger. But I guess one thing is if we're having a conversation and someone's like, oh, how do you like feel about this thing? And I've come to realize that they're asking how I emotionally feel about something, but I'd be like, oh, so like I think about this one study and like how like this and this is their findings on that, and this is what I learned from like that particular experience, and that's just how I feel about it. And they're like, that's great, but how do you feel about that? Oh, okay. And so just trying to like get on kind of the same page as other people while also still be authentically myself can be hard sometimes.
Mhm.
I'm sure everybody goes through that like at some point, but I would say that and like the space cadet, social interaction, and I think the last thing I had trouble with is the balance of like work and friendship and all of these. Because I feel like time just gets away from me all the time. So it's like, oh, I have all these plans, and it seems like from the way I mapped it out in my head, like, oh, I could totally get this done on time, and then it's like maybe I did one or two of those things from a realistic standpoint, and then it's like, oh crap, I wasn't able to like see that person or call that person or do this thing. But I've been getting a lot better with it by pretty much like if I say I think it'll take me this much time, I'll do it and then write down like how much time it actually took. And that's been super helpful. So it's like now like my timetables are a lot more realistic, which is super nice.
What do you mean by your timetables are more realistic?
Um so like I'll think in my head, so it's like, okay, I work at the school, let's say I have to be there at 8 o'clock and then I'm done by 3. And then I have to go to the bank, and then I have to do all these things and then meet my friend at like this time. And I'll think, okay, well, it'll just take me maybe 5 minutes to go to the bank from work. Um, it'll take me maybe 10, 15 minutes tops to like make my sandwich and get ready and then out the door. So I'll make those plans based on that. But then it's like, oh, it actually took me 15 minutes to get to the bank. It took me like 30 minutes to like get the sandwich together and get ready. And then, oh, I forgot that it takes time to drive there.
Gotcha.
And so it's like, oh, the time that I thought I had with that friend or with a date or whatever it is was not what I thought. And that strains relationships too, because I could totally see where the other person's coming from, where it's like, hey, we set this time and you're late, and this isn't the first time that's happened.
You're the one who told me what time to show up,
Exactly.
and you're 15 minutes
Yeah.
late.
Yeah, and it's really embarrassing. And so like there were some times where I'd be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't like make like a dead set plan or whatever, until I think on the internet they gave like suggestions for like ADHD, but honestly, I think it could work for anybody that just has difficulty with timing. But they're like, yeah, just write down how long you think it will, and then write down how much it actually is, so that it's like, okay, I could be a little bit more realistic with it, and I actually haven't had problems in that area at all. I also set like a bunch of alarms on my phone. I think my supervisor's like, what alarm's that for? Oh, that's the alarm for me to go on my lunch. What's that alarm for? That's the alarm to say that I'm done eating.
That's
Does
the
that,
alarm
go
for
ahead.
me to stop chewing on this part of the sandwich.
I have finished a bite.
Right.
Come on, you're cutting into my bite time.
Right. It's like, oh, that's the alarm to get up. That's the alarm to get in my car, which I actually have.
Honestly, fair. I
Uh-huh.
do have that time as well when I'm getting ready for work. I look at the clock. I'm like, oh shit.
I should have been in the car. Oh, right now.
Right? So, yeah, exactly. Especially in winter time and things are like
Hmm.
slower. And so, like, ever since I did that, like, I haven't been late to anything, which is awesome. Or even just thinking, oh, I'm gonna be like a little late, and just like texting them, because
Mm.
if anything, that shows like, okay, like she's letting me know like as soon as possible. Like that shows
Uh-huh.
that she cares. It's not that I was sitting here forever and then she shows up and is like, hey.
She's putting the
What?
effort in and letting me know.
Exactly, exactly.
Uh, what was your childhood like? Is your family close? Do you have like friends who are more family than your actual family?
So I'm super lucky. I would say yes to all of those. So like my immediate family and I are super close. At least recently. I would say like, so I have two siblings. Um and the eldest is 9 years older than me, and the middle child is 7 years older. So when I was younger, like I was in elementary school and they were at the end of their middle school
Hmm.
years and getting into high school and stuff. So when I was younger, I wasn't super close with them at all. Um, we didn't really fight either. We just didn't really interact really that much at all. And I was close to my parents, which is super nice. And um, but it was almost like kind of being like the only child for a while and just kind of doing my own thing. And then when I turned probably like 16, 17, that's when I started getting closer to them. Because even though they were in college and out of college, I think like once you get to like 16, 17, you're kind of not on the same maturity level, but like close enough that it's like, oh, I kind of get the jokes that they're saying or the references they're talking about, or a lot of the things that we're interested in, or even if you want to go to like the big questions, either political or religious.
You
And so we were,
understand
yeah,
politics and
yeah,
philosophy and can hold your
right?
own in those conversations.
Yeah, because otherwise it's not, it'd be like, oh, hi, Michelle, you're 5 years old. Want to
Mhm.
help me do like
What up?
my algebra homework? Not really, no. And so when I was younger, I was definitely a lot closer to my friends. There was actually a trailer park like across from my house, and there were some kids that went to my school that lived there, and so I would bike there, hang out. We would bike to like this little candy shop, get like a bunch of candy. I think at the time my favorite was this spray sour candy, and it was $2. It was just awesome. I was like, yeah, and then they had like this trampoline, which my mom, sorry mom, she didn't
After
want
your
me to go
mom.
on there at all, but I did anyway. And my justification in my brain is, well, they have a net around the trampoline, so if I fall, I'll land in the net and it's fine. Which I never hurt myself, so that's good. And so I do that all the time and do things at school. And then this is so fun, but like my parents are older. I think right now they're in their mid 60s. And so like my mom had this VHS of Tybo. Have you ever heard of that?
Is that like a form of meditation?
No. So it's like this 1990s exercise program thing.
Mm.
I loved that so much. I would do it all the time and be like, I know how to fight and stuff. And so, like, for preschool and like early elementary, whenever there's like a bully, it's like, I know Tybo. Don't mess with me. That was fun. um, And but yeah, so yeah, now like we're super close, play video games with each other and all that stuff. Um and but yeah, so I guess kind of like a mixed bag of a bunch of different things just because of the age difference is so large.
So you have like a lot closer friends because they were more relatable at certain points in your life, and as you grew older, you just became more relatable with your siblings.
Right, right. So it was less like because it kind of felt like of roommates almost, where it's like we never really talk to each other, never really hang out, but you exist.
Mhm.
And then it was like, oh, we have things in common. Cool. Okay, now we can
Crazy.
interact and all that stuff and be close. And it's interesting. And then like with my parents being older at the time too, there it was more like, oh yeah, just yeah, go Michelle, like be safe, don't do anything crazy. I was like, okay, which I never did actually. I was always very good about like saying, oh, this is where I'm gonna be. I'll be back at this time.
You and me
And
both. We were
yeah,
independent but boring.
I
right.
was the bad boy.
I think even my mom like told me at one point where it's like you're just so responsible. I know I can trust you with things, and I was like, oh no, I'm so boring.
I'm a child and I'm this boring already.
Right? I
I
think
mean,
I even like I think my grandma like I think I was 7 or 8 and it was my birthday and she's like, okay, like we're gonna buy you some pajamas and she's like, what about these? And I'm like, Grandma, those are $30. Like that's way above the price range of what PJ should be.
you're already telling her what to spend her money on.
Yeah. I was like, that's not fair. What about these? These are like $10. These are $15. Like, that's fair for a pair of pajamas for a 7-year-old. Like, I'm going to grow out of these.
I mean, you're right.
You're right.
I, it's like, it's so weird, but like, I think because of like having older parents and older siblings, and you see how they do things and conduct themselves, it was almost like I grew up faster.
How much do you think that independence really affected you as a child? Did it like really change the way you grew up, or
It
was it
did.
a little
I
more
would say a
minimal?
lot. So like one is like being like, oh well, I can't go to those crazy parties, like
Mhm.
these things will happen. Like that until like college where it's like, okay, like I'm an adult now, like it's okay to like do these things. When I was younger, it was like, no way. Um I would say for the most part it was a benefit because it's like, okay, I had an understanding of money and how that worked and how to save. Like I had a huge savings like before college that I had from like birthday money, Christmas money and all that. Um and then even like how to deal with friendships. And I think that's why like when people ask how I feel about things, I think I always approach situations as logically as I can. So it's like, well, I might feel that way, but it could change. And so like what's more important is like how I handle the situation. Um like when I was younger, um I remember being told like stop crying because it's not going to fix anything. And that like really stuck with me where it's like, yeah, I guess that's true. And so I think like when I was younger, I took it maybe a little too far where it was like sometimes I felt like kind of numb about certain things that upset me because it's like I got to fix it or attempt to fix it in some way and then I'll feel better. Um but now I think I took it to a more healthy direction from having the friends that I do now, like you guys, where it's like people asking, like, oh, but how do you feel about these things? And I think I accepted that it's like, it's okay to acknowledge being upset or being mad and still trying to like figure a plan out instead of like because before, like, if I was upset about something, I would like hold it in for a long time until it explodes later, but in a totally unrelated situation.
Mm.
And so it'd be like, am I upset about this or this? I don't remember. So it was actually harder to address problems and situations the way I handled it as a kid. So I'm glad, like, I learned how to deal with that better. It's kind of interesting how kids interpret what adults say, where it's like instead of, oh, stop crying, like, um, it won't fix anything, instead of thinking, oh, it's just they don't want me to be sad and they don't know how to handle that. And so they're just saying to stop it and then, like, we'll fix it kind of thing. And as a kid, I took it as emotions are bad by
Mhm.
expressing them because they won't fix things. So, and so that's interesting how my child mind interpreted that. But it's never
Those
too
little,
late to change.
those tiny little things will stick with you your entire life, and as an adult, it's hard as hell to know when what you're going to say is going to affect a child like that, and when you can just say it won't change anything, they'll be like, "Oh, you're right. I'm going to go get a new ice cream bar."
Right. Instead of like, it's okay to be sad that your ice cream fell, but, let's get a new one, or like maybe
Uh-huh.
approaching it that way. But at least I know that now, so that when I deal with kids either in the school or I eventually want to have a family. So it's like,
Mhm.
okay, I know not to do that because this is like an unintended consequence of what could happen. And like the other thing too is, and I've learned to reconcile it as well, but like when I was younger, like having siblings so much older, whenever they would accomplish something, and like my parents never compared us or anything like that. So I know it was like just from like my own competitive personality and things like that. But
Mhm.
I would see like the things that my siblings are doing or accomplishing. So it's like, oh, I got first in robotics and creating this robot. And then I'm like, hey, mom, I got an A+ on this like handprint Santa Claus.
Mom,
Woo!
I drew a thing.
And it's one of those where it's like, okay, I was 5 and they're in middle school. Like, of
Mhm.
course, they're not gonna be like, honestly, they can't even be comparable. But like, when I was younger, it was more like, okay, like, that's like an actual, like, big accomplishment. So, like, I need to do things. And so I think, like, when I ended up in middle school and high school, I was like, okay, I'm going to take 2 foreign languages. I'm going to be the student or the secretary of the student body. I'm going to do a play. I'm going to do tennis. I'm going to I'm going to do science fair and science olympiad. So I did all of those things, which was awesome and great for my resume, and like I'm glad I had those experiences. But when I was a senior in high school, I actually had a panic attack at one point because I realized I can't do this. I'm It's like 2 a.m. and I have to get up at 5 to get to like this early practice thing, and then I have work later, and I haven't studied for this test. And so like what I ended up doing is like, okay, I'll quit the job. I'm gonna be working for the rest of my life anyway. Let's enjoy being a kid. And then I think I quit Spanish and just decided to do French. And then I was fine. So it was more like eventually I learned like, okay, it's okay to try things and to have like a variety of different experiences, and it's okay to be competitive and push yourself. But I've learned that it's like, okay, I'm not in competition with my siblings. Like, they have their strengths and their abilities and their accomplishments, and that's awesome. And then I have mine, and they're different, but that's fine. Doesn't make it any less. And that, like, I shouldn't get to the point where I have a panic attack, because that's obviously not good, and clearly I'm not enjoying it or even putting my all, because how could you put all of your time equally into all of these things? And so I realized, okay, I do my best work when I have like smaller things, but they're things that I really care about or that I'm super interested in, and I do better work and I feel better about it. It's like, okay, it's like my self-worth isn't in the things that I do for other people or the awards I get.
So you were all those things sound like somebody who's a perfectionist would do, but you are doing it just to have accomplished things,
Yeah.
which is really interesting to me because especially for somebody who has older parents and older siblings, it didn't. You just wanted to accomplish things just like they did, which is that's a different take on childhood. I've never heard that.
Yeah. Yeah, like it's just interesting. It's like, okay, like they're doing these things, I got to do these things too because I'm related to them. They're my blood. They can do it. And then even like I think everyone to like a certain point gets kind of into the clicky thing a little bit, like with their peers.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
like for when I was in 6th grade, I tested so high in language that I was put into it was called the Summit program at the time, but it was basically like a gifted program. But math is not my strong suit. And I remember like one kid was like, Michelle, you're in the gifted program? And I'm like, yeah. Well, why can't you do math? I was like, darn it, why can't I do math? That I must be dumb in some way. And then it's like, no, you're just gifted in this thing and then not so well in this other thing, which is fine, and everybody's like that. But I took it as like, oh, you're not intelligent. And I kind of put myself in like the intelligent nerd clique. So it was like, oh no, like I don't have a place, or I'm not doing super well, so I can't be like a good successful person if I'm not doing this. So it's like kind of like not necessarily perfectionism, but as long as I reached the goal that I set for myself, like that's all that mattered to me to a certain point, or as long as I was doing the things that I was like, yep, I'm doing everything good.
But you put
And
so
like,
much on your plate that it frustrated you.
right. Or even just like learning that just because something's hard doesn't mean you'll never get it, or doesn't mean, or even if you don't ever get it, mean that you're not intelligent. And it's like, I basically learned till, well, my senior year with like that panic attack and stuff, is that no one is good at everything. And in everything you're good at, there's probably somebody out there that does that thing better than you. So instead of like making your self-worth on that, do like, how could I do better in the things that I care about? Or if I have like a talent or something, how do I improve my own skills on that? Or how do I use it to help somebody else? And have it that be the framework of success, instead of like, I have to be number one at this thing or I'm trash.
That is a pretty enlightened take for a kid, honestly.
Yeah.
Growing up fast, I guess.
I
mean,
guess.
and it makes sense. You just had
Like
older
I had a TV
people.
addiction when I was 10, and I got myself out of it.
Do you want to go
Like
more on
I think
that?
I would watch, man, maybe
What do you mean by TV addiction? Like, yeah, I hear it. It sounds like some 1980s, 1990s thing of kid is just glued to the TV.
Actually, it kind of fit that stereotype. So pretty much like after school, my dad had a TV in his office. So after school, I'd go in there, close the door, put on Nickelodeon, and then watch till like I was told to go to bed. And I did that every single day on the weekends. I think that's why like I know so much like references to like TV shows of the early 2000s because of how many hours I spent on them. But I remember just feeling like, what am I doing with my life? Like, I'm not accomplishing anything. I'm just what, like, I would see these characters. So, like, Avatar: The Last Airbender was like my favorite, and it's like,
Great show.
Aang and Katara, like, they're learning water bending from this scroll. They're like traveling the world and meeting people to like save the world from total annihilation and things like that. And I'm watching TV. What am I doing? And so like I taped a piece of paper onto the TV screen and put "Don't do it for you" on there. And then like I would walk in and then see that and be like, nope, can't do it unless it's like Tybo or something like that. That was like my one exception because at least I'm like working out. And then I would just go outside or ask like one of the neighborhood kids to like play or something. And after doing that for 2 months, I broke the addiction. And I think when I told one of my friends that, they're like, "You broke an addiction at 10?" Jesus, Michelle. It's like, I was determined.
Well, you were talking earlier about there's certain things that your parents didn't teach you about, like, what is it called? Like your personality. That there's just some things that you have just developed on your own. One of the big themes on our podcast is the battle of nature versus nurture. And I kind of want to ask, where do you think most people are falling under? Is nature more important or is nurture more important?
That's a good question. I kind of think of it so I have a minor in psychology. Ooh, I have a degree in so smart. um, but
Don't
in that,
downplay yourself.
oh, thank you.
You have a
Yeah,
degree. It's very good.
So yeah, thank you. I will look at it from, or I've always kind of looked at it from that lens. So like, of course, there's different schools of thought within psychology, but the one that attracted me the most, or just seems to make the most sense, is that it's both, and it's kind of hard to tell where one ends and begins necessarily. So like, I don't know if you heard of epigenetics at all.
No.
So epigenetics is basically the idea that we're born with a set of DNA that can influence us physically and to a certain extent like personality. And when we go out into the world and interact with the environment, some of those DNA strands are turned on or turned off. And they actually did a study with twins that were separated. They didn't separate them. They were put for adoption and chosen by different families. And so they were chosen for this longitudinal study, which is basically a study that goes for a long period of time. And they asked them questions about their lives, their experiences, and about their personality, and asked relatives and people close to them to kind of collaborate that. And they found that with the twins, there were a lot of similarities. I think they even had the same name for like an imaginary friend. They had similar life experiences, and I think like their wives have similar personalities and even like looks to them. But then there are some things that were completely like opposite from each other. And so for me, I think they're just so tied to each other. So it's like the nature influences you, and so does nurture too. And I do think that some people say that like you can't or people don't change. I don't think that's true. I think people 100% can change if they want to. So it's like the person I was when I was a kid was very different than the person I am now. And I would say that's both from like nurture and the people around me and the experiences I had, but also just a better understanding of my nature. And so it's like, oh, maybe I misunderstood this one aspect. Like ADHD is one example of that. That's something I had from birth forever, but we misinterpret it for just a personality thing. And then I learned different ways to adapt and better address it. And so the difficulties I had when I was younger, I don't have now, or at least in a mini amount. So I would say it's both, maybe even like a 50-50.
So they're both important.
Yes, 100%.
Do you think one cannot exist without the other? Almost like a yin and yang of building character.
I would say yeah. Because like you could think of it in the sense that there's some skills or like academically that I'm just going to have more trouble with than others, or not be as successful at. Even if I like tried and practiced it and things like that, like it just won't get to a certain point to actually do that, even though it will be better. So like, there's still, if it's something you enjoy, there's still reason if you're even if you're bad at it. But it's like, okay, so like these are things that you can accomplish. You can accomplish. Here's all the possibilities. And nurture is you activating and deactivating those things that create like the finished product, so to speak. And like there are even instances where maybe you'd be this way for a certain amount of time, and then you have an experience, and then that genetic marker turns on that wasn't turned on when you were younger. So it's like, oh, here's all the possibilities, and then nurture says this is how it's going to come about.
Okay.
I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
I'm trying to. It's nature is more the scientific, like this is the pool of what's going to happen, and then nurture is this is what's going to happen on the way.
Yeah, or even not happen.
Or not
It's
happen.
like, oh, like you didn't experience any of these things, so these genes aren't activated.
Okay. Yeah. Huh. I like that. I like it a lot.
Thank you.
I do too. All right. Well, I want to ask you one more question before we let you go.
Gotcha.
Before
You
you can
can't-
leave.
You can't leave until we ask you the last one.
Until we ask you the last question. Another kind of big one. Do you tend generally to be an optimist or a pessimist?
Ooh, that's interesting. Oh, this is gonna sound like cliche, I guess, but
It's allowed to.
I I would say like both, but for different things. So, like,
Mhm.
I consider myself an optimist for things that are within my ability to control,
Okay.
and a pessimist for things that are outside of it. Um, so, like, generally speaking, like you look historically and things like that, like, the world always gets plunged into like chaos of some kind, be it economic, war, political, all of those, whatever it is. Like every generation has experienced something not great that is kind of outside their ability to like control. I mean, like you have voting and things like that, but like right in your vicinity that you can do like right here, right now. And so I would say in that sense, more pessimistic, just because things just tend to repeat itself in that cycle. But for the things that I can handle either by how I react to something or the things that I choose for myself and stuff, I like to remain optimistic because even if something doesn't go the way I planned, I can always learn and grow from that. I found that like the most awful situations, I've learned more about myself and was able to adapt accordingly than things that were like great or went my way. So I guess that's my answer on that one.
Very pragmatic.
I'm a very pragmatic, logical person. I would say like my style is more the Aristotle's ethics is
Mm.
how I kind of make my moral framework and how I navigate the world pretty much. I don't know if you or Shannon are familiar with it.
I am
mean,
not.
Okay, so I cannot pronounce the name of it, but let's see. I'm gonna look it up. I can't remember the name, but it starts with an N and it ends with ethics, and it was written by Aristotle pretty much. And his premise is that self improvement or becoming better and being a better moral person, it's complex and very difficult. And so like there are different ways that you can go about it. So the first is to find like an aim, which is like the end goal. And so he said for your end goal, it should be like a pure virtue. So goodness could be one. Um, another could be, uh, well, I guess if you want to be bad, or power, or making money, or like whatever the end is that you have for yourself. And he suggested, of course, goodness because it leads to a more moral, or like the choices that you make tend to be more moral. And then like working on aspects of yourself that would stop you from getting there. And you can learn that from either experience, which does take the longest, but you could do it that way. You could have a mentor, somebody that already went through that, and you can learn from them. Or you can get it from like outside sources like books or movies, or just observing other people without interacting with them directly. And I feel like that's actually a pretty solid, very practical way to like go about your life. And it's something that I think like I could realistically do that within the lifespan of a human. Like I can't be a perfect person, but I could do that.
It's a little more realistic.
Mhm.
I will have to take a look at that.
Yeah.
I was whilst you were talking, it's the Nicomachean
See, I can't pronounce
ethics
it, and I didn't want to try because I was like, oh, I don't want to sound dumb, but
or Nichoma.
I think
I'm
it's
just
Nicomachean ethics, I think, but
well.
I will definitely look into it. I like philosophy or how to live life, and that's fun. I like learning about it.
Me too.
So I think that is gonna have to do it for today's episode.
I think
That
so.
went by way faster than I thought.
Yeah.
Dang. But it was
Damn,
super
Michelle.
fun.
Talking good.
I do try to be eloquent, with like my job description. I gotta
Yeah,
get
that's
that
true.
right.
Aw,
You
try to
gotta
be
show the kids how to
fancy.
talk.
This is how you do it, kids. This is how you
We
do a
are the-
podcast.
We are the kids. Teach
We
us
are the
your ways,
kids.
Michelle.
Oh God.
How do we talk?
We damn well better now.
I don't know. I don't know about that.
I can tell.
Hey, thank you to Nadia Diaz for our podcast cover art. Her Instagram is at artheadcreations. That'll be linked in the description. If I wasn't so sick, I could probably say words properly. And thank you to Jensen Kral, who did our intro and outro for the song. And he's got a demo out on all the music apps, Spotify and iTunes and Amazon Music. And it's called Knocking on Doors for a musical that he's been working on called Tea Time. Malcolm, you thought it was a bop, didn't you?
I liked it. It was pretty boppy.
I like Jensen. He does good music, and he's a good guy. So go
Yeah.
check it out. Go check the song out and go ask Nadia to make some art for you. She's always willing to get people to want art from her.
She's always willing to make art.
She's always willing to make art for
And
a
if you
price.
prompt her, I'm sure that's only good.
Yes, do it. The other thing is send us questions. Do it.
Yes, we have an email address.
We have an email address. It's waiting the number 4 seconds at gmail.com. It will be in the description, or you can just DM me on Facebook or Instagram. You could also try Malcolm, but he don't respond.
I don't check my
He
Facebook
hates
ever.
people. He doesn't hate people, but thank you again, Michelle, for coming and hanging out with us. I know I just did my housekeeping stuff. Kind of took a long time, but
It
I'm
was
glad
awesome.
you're here.
I'm glad to be here. Anytime.
So, thank you again, everybody, for listening, and we will see you next time. Unless
next
Jed.
Bye.
Unless Jed.